Hello and welcome to Lore Watch, roundtable freeform discussion about lore in your favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Perez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I've got some marvelous co-hosts with me today. As always, my stalwart companion, Matt Rossi. How you doing today, Matt?
Let's do the show.
Eager to get started. I love that. And then rounding out this trio of troubadours is Eric O'Day. How you doing, Eric?
Oh, not bad, Joe. Doing pretty good. How are you?
I am doing great. I am no longer buried under several feet of snow. Always a positive. So, friends, I asked for questions and you delivered. Thank you very, very much. And make sure you keep those coming. If you have questions for this or any of our shows, be sure to send those in to podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Ask that you specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. You can also hit us up on Discord. We have the podcast Q and questions channel, which is open for everybody. Same rules apply. And if you are a Patreon subscriber, you can also hit us up on the Patreon Q and podcast questions channel. We tend to look there first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. And as of course, we appreciate everything you do for us. We wouldn't be here without you. Without further ado, let's get started. And this first one comes from Octomos. Listening to the most recent Lore Watch and hearing you talk about the Forgotten One had me rolling that concept around in my head. I haven't at all been convinced the fifth old god is accounted for. So what if being forgotten isn't just a matter of being ancient, but a deliberate function of staying that way? The False Hydra, the Ood, and Pennywise all come to mind in addition to the original origin of most cosmic horror in Lovecraft. Do you think it's likely some form of this at play? Or if not, what would you speculate they would do with another old god now that Xal'atath has Dementius? Good question, Octomos. We'll kick this over to, we'll say Matt first, if you have any thoughts or anything you want to share on that one.
Well, I can never speak to how likely anything is. Things are as likely as they end up being. It's a constructed narrative. There's no gambling here. But I will say that I think it's worth remembering that a lot of the narrative involving the old gods and the titans and so on is malleable in more than one direction. It's not just a matter of cosmic perspective. Things have literally changed. There have been things left behind that turned out to not be accurate. There have been things left behind that were, not entirely intact. There's lots of stuff we don't know about the Black Empire, like, for instance, what it did for thousands upon thousands of years. I mean, it obviously had inhabitants, and some of them, like the Nerubians we see in The War Within, clearly didn't want to go back to those days. They were like, nope, we've done this, we're not happy with it. And the Nerubians in An Kahet and Azjol Nerub, they also seemed disinterested in the return of the Titan. Remember the original, when we were talking about the Forgotten One, the Forgotten One was a forgotten one to them specifically. They did not want to remember him. They did not want to worship him. They did not want to interact with him. And they don't have like Naraki in their own cities if they can avoid it. There's a Naraki in Old Kingdom, but he's there very much on the benefit of not of the Titan, not of the Nerubians, but of their old god former masters, which they are trying to avoid being enslaved to again. So I don't know what it would be like if we had another old god. I just know that we don't even know how many old gods there actually ever were. Like, for all we know, there were 30 of them. We just because we know about 6 doesn't mean that's all there was.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them we know was constructed later. Like, he's actually sort of built out of surplus old god parts. Gahoon there. So yeah, there's a lot of wiggle room. Yeah, lots of wiggle room in terms of which you want to think about the old gods and their existence. I don't think Dementius really has much to do with it, honestly. We've had back and forths on this show about what Dementius is. Is Dementius the last Void Lord, like somebody said? Somebody rhymes with Pretzlin. Or is he something else? Is he an actual god? Or an actual Void Lord? Are there such things as actual Void Lords, or do they only get discreet when they leave the Void? I don't know. So I do think it would be interesting to try and play up the fact that there's no real truth for the old gods. Like the Void Lords and the old gods come from a place where everything is true and therefore nothing is true. The thousand truths, remember? I would like it if we had straight up contradictions popping in and out that are never resolved because they shouldn't be resolved because they shouldn't be resolvable. But that's just my take on it, right?
Eric, what about you?
I've got two things. And first is that I absolutely agree with Matt when he says that it's a constructive narrative in that when we try to figure out, what's going to happen and if things are possible, it's not like we're looking at a story that's already told and trying to figure out what comes next. We're not watching a movie from 1975 and trying to figure out how Robert Redford is going to be able to figure it out, how to pull off the big heist, because it already happened. And there's no chance of it changing. This story is constantly changing, and what if it's useful for the developers and the writers to pick up a piece from a long time ago, then they might do it. And the writers and developers change. The Forgotten One was something that was put into a game 25 years ago. Someone came up with that and put it in. Could it be that another writer would say, like, hey, remember that? Like, that would be cool if we could actually pick up that piece. And we've seen them do that all the time. Retcons and tying things together and bringing back things from way back. So that's interesting, but also I totally agree that we're trying to uncover something that's a plane that's still being built as it's in the air for all this time. And secondly, I like the idea behind this question. I like the idea that there's another old god and its skill or its identity is hiding and deception. That's always a good, character trait in a bad guy. That we have the map of the old gods and the elemental lords having split up ancient Kalimdor and all the territories mapped out. There's no room for another one. But first of all, that comes from the Titans, so they might be lying. We know they've lied to us before. Second of all, there could be another old god that was hiding the whole time and either working with or against or doing its own thing. And finally, could there be another secret whisper old god at another location in another part of the world? We haven't seen all of Azeroth. We're constantly seeing new continents and islands. Some of them fit into that original Kalimdor. Some of them might not. Maybe if we go to the Arathi Empire's land all the way across the ocean, could it be that there's another old god all the way over there that we've barely interacted with at this point, that's got its tendrils going out? So I think it would be very interesting, and I think it could be something that we'd have to deal with way down the line. I don't know if another old god would come in Midnight or in the Last Titan, but it could be interesting for past that and in the future of World of Warcraft.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start my set of comments with agreeing with both of you, and I think the folks at home understand that anything we say is generally speculation because we can't know and because it can change at any moment in time to serve whatever the creative directive whim is in that moment. I'm going to say something that may be a little bit unpopular for some folks, so I will accept whatever backlash comes in. When Steve Denauser and team were in charge of storytelling, it was coherent, or at least they attempted to make it coherent. The problem that you have right now, too, is with Chris Metzen in charge of, creative endeavors again. Not that he's bad, but I always think of him in terms of, there was an old Family Guy, cutaway bit where it was like Stephen King trying to sell his next novel to his publisher. And he just grabbed a lamp. It was like, the next book is about a lamp monster. And I'm like, I've met Chris Metzen, and he is a brilliant, imaginative man, but sometimes he just veers off in these wild directions. He's very hard to predict what's going to catch his attention at that time. And so a lot of his narrative stuff, even from the early days to what became, the storytelling of now, it doesn't necessarily have a coherent, flow to it at every bend, which is why you have a lot of those, like Eric said, those picked up threads that they can maybe pull on later. But that's the reason why those threads exist. There's a question that we'll deal with that a little bit later too, that I think is relevant. So as far as the Forgotten One being an old god that maybe has a power that allows it to just essentially be forgotten, I'm not opposed to that because, again, old gods can do whatever. It's a million possibilities, thousand possibilities, infinite possibilities of what they could do. In terms of how many old gods we've met, the other thing that's happened since we first encountered our very, very early old god, when we first started dealing with Cthulhu, and going through and learning what an old god essentially was since then, and then encountering bits of old gods later, and the Build-A-Bear old god and all that other stuff. When we went to Shadowlands, we learned that old gods existed on other planets, and which means, in theory, old gods can exist not just on other planets, but potentially other planes of existence or other realms as well. Which
I feel like if we're going to be bringing that one up, we have to talk about the OG Old God Not a Nazareth appearance, which was actually in Burning Crusade.
yeah,
When you find a bunch of Arakoa who are summoning what is almost certainly an old god, considering it uses Cthulhu's model.
with the Cipher of
And
Damnation, yeah.
yeah, so are there other old gods? Almost certainly. We've been seeing them for almost as long as we've had World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
And that guy clearly wasn't. Also, what's hilarious and terrifying is when you go to Alcatraz,
Mm-hmm.
and you go to Alcatraz, and one of the first things that comes up is a multi-stage encounter with things that are imprisoned. One of which is Harbinger. I want to say Harbinger Saram. Is that his name?
Something like that.
Yeah, he's the one who's basically the ripoff of the first boss from AQ40, and he has a little speech that I've never been able to forget. He's like, "We are as countless as the stars, and no force in existence can
Harbinger
make it."
Skyrus. Sorry.
Yeah. We are as countless as the stars, and no force in existence has the power to bring us to our knees, not even the mighty legion. And that implies that we're looking at this from the wrong angle in terms of how many old gods are there. It might not even be the old gods you have to worry about. It's all the other things that serves the Void Lords ultimately.
Yeah. And the other thing is, we know now too that things that serve the Void Lords and even things that serve the old gods can have incredible inordinate amounts of power, right? And depending on what they're corrupted from or born from, because like Ansarek and her experimentations with the Black Blood kind of prove that they sort of, we talked about this last week or the week before, about how it gave us this idea of like potentially where Faceless Ones came from, or how the evolution of old god servants maybe sort of happened, what the Black Blood kind of does, and that maybe that the Nerubians were natural denizens of Azeroth at one point that were mutated, but that also shows that weird potential, weird power can be unlocked, and in some cases servants of these beings can be more powerful than their masters at some point and break free, going with the Void Lord route and looking at Xal'atath. I mean, it took all 4 old gods essentially to constrain her in the first place, all 4 original OG to constrain her in the first place, and then she's more powerful than they are. She's at this point, even with our help, she was able to use the Dark Heart, knows about it, and is able to, trap Dementius, and now has access to that power. And I understand the root of the question from Octomos is how that deals with Xal'atath and Dementius, because she doesn't have any love for the old gods. They're beneath her. Her having more power just makes it easier for her to disrupt them if she comes up against it. But it also depends on what old god, where, what power it's wielding, what world it's on, what dimension it's in. These are all variables that can create extra conflict. Go ahead.
There's another variable in that we keep assuming that she has access to Dementius's power. We don't know that that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
And even if she does have access to some or even all of his power, we don't know what his power was anymore. We know he got broke into practically infinite shards, and they spent an incredible amount of time recollecting him, but we don't know how much of him was even recollected.
Yeah. We don't know what percentage he was when we faced him at the end of the Mana Force.
And one of the things about these things we have to keep in mind is a lot of stuff we get a skewed view of because the game does a thing called leveling, where you get stronger in the new expansion, even though it's a numerical representation of experience, but it isn't intended to be literal. You're not necessarily that much stronger than you were when you fought Ragnaros, even though you fought Ragnaros back at the original level 60. It's not intended to basically be your character walks into Molten Core and just kills it in one shot. That's not the lore of the game. That's not the story. That's a game mechanic. That's so you don't feel like a chump for having gotten all that power and all those items and all those things. That you can still go farming for stuff and so forth. I really feel like sometimes we forget this and we look at like, well, the Pantheon of Death is way more powerful than the Pantheon because they're from a higher level expansion. It doesn't work that way, and it doesn't work that way with Dementia. So the old gods going from War Within to Midnight, there's no story bump for being 5 levels higher, so players can get a challenge out of fighting you. That's a mechanical thing that is not connected to the lore of the story. So what Xal'atath is doing and how it works and what power sources she has to draw upon, honestly, she's fallible, because I doubt seriously she intended Ilaria to shoot the Dark Heart out of her hand and break it. Like that does not feel like a good move. Even with the whole, I'm trying to subtly subvert Illyria, that felt like a little bit of a goose egg there. So I do think that's something to keep in mind as we talk about all of this stuff. Just because the old gods are not currently in the storyline doesn't mean they're not as powerful enough to do anything. It just means they're not there for whatever reason.
Very true. Eric, any additional thoughts?
Just something Matt said about the speech from the Burning Crusade dungeon and being, the old gods and their servants being as innumerable as the stars. It's always struck me that we got old gods as an infection on Azeroth, and we got 4. And that means that they sent enough old gods, the Void Lords sent out enough old gods through the Great Dark Beyond to infest planets and see what was there and try to corrupt them, that multiple old gods could be on a planet. That suggests to me that there might be thousands or millions. I mean, we don't know much about the universe that we live in, our plane of existence. How many planets are out there? Is it 10? Is it billions? But the fact that there is that many just for our world means that, they're almost like the foot soldiers of the Void Lords doing their bidding, and you can't put that much of your power into a million of something.
Yeah, I mean, the other side of that, though, too, is we also don't know that we only got 4. Because we don't know the full extent of, like, how many were there. We just know that the largest ones took over.
Right.
There could have been thousands of them just flung into every planet, or, like, from what the thing we think we know, is that the Void spewed bits of itself into the, for lack of a better term, the prime material plane, and then wherever they landed. It was sort of like the splatter approach. Wherever they were. We don't know how many wound up wherever. And in certain cases where they say, well, I fought an old god before, looking at like the former warrior of Elune, we don't know that it was only one old god. There could have been 17 that showed up on that planet and only one was left standing, because we know they fought with each other. They hated each other. They only worked together when they had no other choice. Otherwise, they were at war with each other, trying to knock the other ones out. And we can assume trying to like take over as head honcho. So in planets where, there was one old god, how many were there beforehand? And we can assume that when they got to Azeroth, they were all fighting each other for dominance, not just making a break for the core because they wanted to be the primary influence. So there could have been 1,000 that were all fighting, and these are just the last ones left standing.
You just got me thinking about something here, though. What if Yashraj has 7 heads for a reason?
Yeah, because he was the largest, and he was
maybe he was the largest because he ate 6 others,
and because he was the most powerful, right? He had the most power out of all of them,
and maybe that's also why when he got ripped into pimple parts, he ended up scattered in tentacle form all over the bloody continent, because he was already originally all over the bloody continent.
Mm-hmm.
There is something odd about the fact that not only did we have, as you pointed out, the Build-A-Bear of old gods with Gahun, but everybody looked down on N'Zoth.
Mm-hmm.
They all look down on him. Xal'atath even comments on this in Legion that nobody respects N'Zoth. Yet in the end, it's clearly N'Zoth who has control of the most forces. So, I mean, we know that being dead doesn't stop the old gods from doing things. We see that he's been dead for a very long time, and yet Y'Shaaj was still bedeviling the peoples of Pandaria with Shah and his own remains. We know that Cthulhu was supposedly dead after Cho'Gall found it and got it to tell him how to free the others. And that still didn't keep him from empowering Cho'Gall all the way into like Cataclysm. He's still working with Cahun. He's not working with N'Zoth. He's working with Cthulhu. So there's Cthulhu, the same guy we supposedly killed. And I always thought about this when I was thinking about that dungeon. Who of all the dragons would Cthulhu have had beef with? The one that dies at the end of the raid. That's interesting to me because it implies that Cthulhu, even while N'Zoth has got this whole plan involving eggs going on, Cthulhu can still reach out and say, okay, I don't care about any of that. Kill this dragon. He has really offended me with this whole keeping me trapped in here. I want him dead. That is your job. Kill him. And he ends up dead. So there is a certain amount of, I almost feel like it's brinksmanship. Like they're jockeying for position, yes, but they're also trying to raise the stakes. And oftentimes not just sabotage each other, but willfully ignore the other's plans in an attempt to make for maximum disruption. But this all kind of coming around and around in a circle to me. So I'll shut up now.
All right. Well, I think that, or at least I hope that answers your question or gives you some more food for thought, Octomos. We're going to move on to our next one, and this one comes from Maxilla Blastrig from the Four Realms Sisters of Elune on the U.S. side. Eclipsed-eyed Xal'atath keeps talking about being denied her prize. We keep assuming the Void Lords or others of the Void were the ones that thwarted her, but what if it was Elune? Well, I'll start here. We don't know that the Void Lords stopped her, because the only thing we know so far is what we've seen from lore walking, which is her being sent to, I don't want to say oversee, but maybe check in. The Harbinger being the one to check in on what's going on this planet where these old gods are supposed to be doing the bidding of the Void or the Void Lords, and then being shoved in a knife. That's the only thing we really know about her being thwarted. As far as what her prize is, at least we've speculated on it before, but the problem is we don't know. Xal'atath at her core is an almost unknowable being, changed certainly since being forced into this form in the mortal realms and in a form of a former mortal. There is an element of change that we can only assume is going to happen, much like the Void Lords swinging bits of void into the prime material plane and making them fleshy goo monsters, which was apparently not the original intention, as we found from that very same lore walking scenario, that they weren't planned. They weren't the plan. And as such, they are not beholden to their previous mission. So what her prize is, I think, is beyond just simply power. We don't really know. We know that
I'm not going to guess.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Matt. I mean, we have guesses, but I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, my theory is that looking at everything Xal'atath has done, it is Azeroth itself. That is the world soul of Azeroth that she is trying to claim. I don't know to what end. I don't know if she's going to try to fuse with it. I don't know if she's going to go the whole Void Titan thing. I don't know, but I definitely think it is Azeroth, based on the fact that Azeroth is the one having nightmares. Like when in the past, when the whole thing about the Legion was coming, and then the various old god minions and satyrs doing things to the Emerald Dream, all that stuff. we keep getting a sense that Azeroth is directly responding to what's happening. And it's Azeroth that's directly responding in the War Within. It is the call of Azeroth that multiple people hear. I think it is very similar to what she tried to do on Koresh. I think she was going for Koresh's World Soul. She was trying to get it away from Dementius. And to a degree, putting Dementius in the Dark Heart is both a punishment for it getting in her way, and also it's an attempt to recycle some of that power.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because remember, Dementius was feeding on the World Soul of Koresh. And she definitely, everything she did on Koresh, if you look at all the things she did, all the assignments, the alliances she made, all the tricks she came up with, seemed aimed at ultimately getting rid of Dementius so she could claim it. Like, what were the native peoples going to do when they all got turned into bandage, energy mummies? I mean, it's not like they could fight her. Was Nexus Walker going to be able to fight her? No. They'd been maneuvered into a position where they'd effectively destroyed their own people. And she could reveal it anytime she wanted to for maximum disruption amongst the people who otherwise would be trying to stop her from getting the World Soul. Unfortunately for her, the way it worked out, the World Soul was all but destroyed. I don't think it has enough power left to really do much for her. So grabbing Dementius is a decent backup, and you'll notice she immediately heads for the Sunwell.
Another source of incredible font of power that has been reignited with the essence of a Naru. Yeah.
Yep.
That's not coincidence.
And originally, the Sunwell was made with the same waters as the Well of Eternity, which was literally powered by the blood leaking from Azeroth when it was injured during the original battle against the old gods and their servants. So I feel like there's enough there to at least think this is at least a possibility. But whether or not it's actually the case, we'll have to wait and see. But that is my guess for what she's after.
Eric?
I would have bet my monthly transmog budget that Matt was going to say Azeroth was her prize, and I agree with that. And I think that trying to figure out, one of the questions I was going to ask is, if she's going after a World Soul, why not Koresh? And then Matt kind of answered the question before I even got to ask it, which is, Koresh is maybe weakened, maybe not enough power for whatever Xal'atath's grand plan is. And
also we should remember, since we're talking about this, other World Souls have popped up. We've seen at least one besides Koresh's World Soul. And that's our good old buddy Death from Argus, the World Soul of Argus. That thing was not as powerful as Azeroth's World Soul. That's from Magni. Like, that thing was stunted and crazy, and it still turned into a horrible nightmare monster that almost killed us. And when we got sent to the Shadowlands, immediately destroyed that whole thing. So imagine the difference in power between the destroyed, barely intact World Soul of Argus, of Koresh, versus Azeroth's World Soul, which is clearly still going and not destroyed. So I gotta feel like the things we've saw in the War Within with the Earthen definitely points to Azeroth, and for that matter in Dragonflight, points to Azeroth as a World Soul being a very going concern as opposed to others we've run into.
Yeah, I think that not only maybe is it more powerful, but like you guys have talked about multiple times before, could it be special in some other way? Could it be the presence of the balance of the cosmic forces, and Azeroth being the prime world soul and the grand target of all these different cosmic entities for some other reason than it's the biggest and the most powerful? And, anything we can talk about that is just speculation, but it seems like we might be headed towards getting some answers on that front in the next expansion or two.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think we're going to be getting a lot more in the way of answers, especially because Xal'atath is going to start likely, I don't want to say giving an expose or doing this whole rundown of what she's doing, but she's got a streak of the villain in her. And, sometimes she likes to do that. Monologuing is a villain's prerogative. But I will disagree with you guys a little bit. And I think that if we're going to speculate, I don't think Azeroth is the ultimate prize. I think it's beyond Azeroth. I think control or the power of Azeroth is a means to an end, one that we don't quite understand yet. And it's because of little things she said. She doesn't She doesn't want to see the destruction of the universe. That's not really her bag, at least not from what we can tell and what she's done with, because otherwise she has the ability to wipe out civilization. She has the ability to just claim power. That doesn't seem to be her MO. She could let it be to the whatever devouring force is coming to consume all of us. She doesn't seem to like that either, and we've speculated many times because the Void doesn't want that, essentially. I don't think anything that exists in the universe necessarily wants that. But she also doesn't seem to really serve the Void Lords anymore either. And Azeroth may be the key to what she wants, but I think it's ultimately like the final stepping stone to get what she ultimately wants. And that's the problem. We don't know what the end game is, because I don't think it's necessarily corrupting Azeroth, because she could have tried to do that a couple different ways, and there are probably easier ways than what she's doing. She's going after the Sunwell, which is not a Void entity, but could potentially be turned to Void power. Again, because it's got that Naru inside of it, and they do have a light-dark cycle. We might wind up with a Void Well before the end of this expansion. Hell, even before the end of Act 1 in the next expansion even happens. But it seems to all be turning towards a greater purpose. And again, not much that they can really predict, but maybe she wants to beat up the Void Lords. Maybe she wants to be in charge of everything. Maybe she wants to claim the universe as her own. But it feels like Azeroth is a key, not the final, not the prize. Like, because once she has it, she's not done. I think there's more that she wants to do. At least that's my opinion. So I don't know if you have anything else you guys want to add to that, or anything else you want to talk about with that before we move on to the next one.
No, I think I said what I meant to.
Okay.
Yep. Just
all right. Our next one comes from X Knight. We've answered a couple questions from them in the past, and this one is a trio of questions. So we'll just kind of go one by one and see how far we get. First one: with Midnight around the corner and the continued talks of the last Titan expansion, should we expect old gods to return before or after the last Titan expansion? I know old gods are hard to kill, but I wonder if the likes of Cthulhu or others making a reappearance. Maybe them coming back might get the Titans to show up. Maybe where might the old gods show up in the world? I guess this kind of goes in with what we've been talking about a little bit as well earlier. We don't know. Right? We know Matt pointed out that Yasharaj is air quote dead, but not really. All the bits are still influencing things around, can still give power, can still have a will of its own. And that may tie back to the fact that, Yasharaj may have eaten 6 other old gods and may have had 7 consciousnesses inside of itself, that they were released as the 7 original Shah. Maybe that they're already present everywhere and we don't know. And as far as where they can make a reappearance, again, possibilities are sort of endless. The other thing that is interesting, though, is pointing out that, the likes of Cthulhu, we as players really haven't gone back and checked on the ones we've kind of put in boxes before, at least in the story. And something comes to mind here. Yogg-Saron and Northrend, sitting there in Ulduar, is a major story beat. It's a major Titan facility that's still functional, that had an old god prison in the middle of it that they had broken out of, kinda. We know that when we tried to use the reorigination device to blast N'Zoth into little particles and sort of laser him, give Azeroth some laser surgery, that Ulduar hung up on us. We know that Odin at one point was going to be heading there, because we freed him from his little bubble, and the first thing he was going to do is go check in on the home base, which is literally where his Valhalla, his little land of fallen warriors, his little prison originally was part of. The Watchers being still alive there, we know that Ra-Den was active for a little while, but Ulduar cut us off. Is that because Yogg-Saron is waking back up? We didn't really do anything once that body was gone. And Matt and I have pointed this out in the past. Serenite was everywhere throughout Northrend. It wasn't just in the middle of Ulduar. That pool you walk into of liquid Serenite that surrounds Yogg-Saron, that's not the only location of it is. We found Serenite in the remnants of the old World Tree, which I feel is relevant potentially here as well. Ice Crown Citadel is constructed of it in a lot of places. A lot of the weapons of the Knights of the Ebon Blade, a lot of the armor of the Knights of the Ebon Blade rely on Serenite. A lot of the stuff in Northrend in general use liquid old god blood to construct their metals and what they were doing. That is not an accident. And slight spoilers ahead for this one. We know we're going back to Northrend at some point, and I would be very shocked if that does not play a story beat in it at all. Because again, unlike recent expansions, we haven't gone back to Northrend in game as far as like story beats are concerned. We haven't checked in on our handiwork. We haven't really seen if we kept anything, like if it's been good. Go ahead, Matt.
We did go back to one place. We went back to the Wormrest Temple because that's where the events of the final raid in Cataclysm take place.
Yeah, but we also but we also know that during that moment there were two giant old god like sandworms opening up that we had to go inside and fight. Literally right there.
Absolutely. But all I'm saying is that's the only place we've seen since. We haven't gone back to anywhere else. I mean, I guess we made some appearances at the Nexus, but that's like way the heck over on the edge of the Borean tundra. And that's actually another thing to point out. Not only could you find Serenite anywhere, like literally there's nodules of it all over the place, but when you go to the Howling Fjord, there's literally a section to the north where the entire, for lack of a better word, the entire zone has been sheared in half. And not sheared in half like up north, south, or east, west. It's literally a gigantic shear underground. Like you can go down and then suddenly you are in this enormous open space that looks like someone ripped something out of the ground. And everybody there is going mad from whispers. And I mean, couldn't get more stereotypically old god if there was a giant sign being held up going, "Hi, it's us, the old gods." Like it's straight up out of their place. But one of the things we never find out is what's the deal with it? Like, why is this happening? And there's certain amounts of time that several times they try to mention that it's the various earthen, like the iron earthen and the iron Vrykul are directly working for ultimately Loken, because Loken is sitting there having gone crazy a long time ago, working directly for Yogg-Saron. And we see that again when we go back to not Ulduar, but Uldaman and the zones beyond it in the south of Kalimdor. You see yet another city, the Halls of Virgination, where you've got these Titan constructs being controlled by the old gods. So the old gods are really good at getting into and infecting these buildings of other beings. And we see that over and over again in terms of what the old gods are up to. So yeah, it's very possible Cthulhu just walked it off. For that matter, we can't really, the only one we know for sure is dead is Yashraj. And even then was still doing stuff until fairly recently, might still be doing stuff. I mean, we can't prove that all the Shah are gone. So yeah, I think going back to Uldaman, to Northrend is really important, just to see if we ever, like, if there's any more stuff going on. Keep in mind that the Death Knights are still hanging out. At least they were, as of Shadowlands, they were still hanging out on Ice Crown Glacier.
Yeah.
Well, what's up with that, guys? You got anything? Got any, feedback for us? Anything you could tell us about all that Saronite you're wearing on your dead bodies? Got something? Because there's a lot to possibly know, and not a lot we've been told.
They're always talking about how the old gods are deathless. They're out of the cycle. They do all that. Time is but a door, death is but a window. I'll be back. So, any time that it's like, well, that entity is vanquished, and you have an NPC, brushing their hands and moving on to the next thing, you're always a little bit like, I'm not so sure. So, we've seen countless characters come back from death or brought back as avatars, or have, their death be just a minor setback. So I would not be surprised if we had to deal with one or all of them. Could the old gods be something like a hive mind, where the whole continent of Northrend is under the influence of Yogg-Saron, and we took off a head or an arm, but the rest of it just kind of still exists, and you
Well, I
have
think
to pluck
Joe,
it out.
yeah, Joe made that point a while back. Actually, I think when talking about what we discovered about world trees at the end of Dragonflight, you're talking about the sheer size of the old gods.
Yeah. About how they are unknowably large. And I mean, I was sort of reinforced in that by looking at what happened right now when we went down to Bugville in The War Within. Like, looking at those caverns to me, and I will maintain this until I am told otherwise, looks like what would happen exactly when you ripped out an old god from the surface of Azeroth. So, like, they're massive.
And part
Yeah,
of
that
this,
one's really easy to believe too. And I'm sorry, Eric, I'll shut up in a second. But that's easy to believe too because there's so much black blood around it.
And not only that, the ceiling, like the scarring, the
Yeah.
void scarring in particular.
Or that, when you get up to the surface and it looks like the petrified remains of a gigantic tree trunk. We've talked about that before.
And the other thing that made me think, going back to the Ashraj thing about the possibility of the old gods having consumed other old gods, is one of the things that I thought was interesting, and it may have just been a stylistic choice. Sometimes that happens, or it may be something more than that. Sometimes that also happens. Go and look at the ceiling of that zone and tell me what you see there. Those constellations look a hell of a lot like what we saw when the rest of the Pantheon was imprisoned and being tortured in Argus, right? Like they look like patterns of souls. I'm not saying that they are, but it wouldn't be surprising to me if Yasharaz was trying to unravel what that looked like and trying to mess with that to better understand how to either A, consume other souls, or B, infect Azeroth. So, sorry, Eric, go ahead.
The last thing I wanted to say was that something that we were talking about here in the last bit of this question, where might the old gods show up? Would the old gods coming back make the Titans show up? We know that the Titans will show up based on what we know, the few things we know about the last Titan. The Titans return to Azeroth, to Ulduar. What if that is Xal'atath's true prize, true goal? What if instead of destroying the universe or ruling the universe, all she really wants to do is take out other cosmic entities of, equal or greater power? What if she wants to wipe out the Titans? And we have hints of that. That's what the stone dragon, why can't it? Iridikron. That's what Iridikron said. Iridikron tells us that with this she'll reclaim it and the Titans will show up. What if Iridikron and Xal'atath bonded over just hating the Titans so much and work together to start a plan to actually get them there in a form where they can be fought? Would the old gods be a part of that? I don't know. Maybe. I wouldn't put it past Xal'atath to use the power of the Sunwell or the Voidwell or whatever it becomes to revive old gods or take their power or have an avatar of them that we have to fight or the Titans have to fight. But I could see all of it being mixed together and old gods coming back in some form.
I do want to point out to one other thing since I've been thinking about. If we're going to talk about locations, keep in mind that the old gods don't have to appear in a location that actually exists.
Yeah.
Ny'alotha.
I was going to say, dealing with Ny'alotha. Ny'alotha didn't technically exist.
Yeah, Ny'alotha was like a after image / echo that did not obey the laws of space and time, and which essentially was like, what if we rebuilt the Black Empire in the future and then projected it back into the past so that it would always be? And it's like, so you're just deciding to dance on top of causality, but that makes sense for the old gods who alter history all the time. That's one of the reasons Nozdormu had to even have a flight, was because he had to have people there to stop the old gods from messing with time again. So there's a lot of, literally this place didn't exist yesterday, but it's here now, that you could totally do with the old gods and their various places. Ironically, Ny'alotha, which is one of the more well-known places in the old god, travelogue that we have, was built by N'Zoth and was specifically targeted by, Xal'atath. In fact, the whole reason she got stuck in a knife in the first place was because she tried to take out Ny'alotha. And got caught.
And it wasn't just her. That's where the fighting of the other old gods was occurring too. Like, don't forget, when we go back in time, we go back to Nyalotha, and it's the elemental generals for the other old gods are there. The only one missing being Therazane. But like they were all there in Nyalotha assaulting Nyalotha. Why? What was going on? Was it just a normal conflict? Was that orchestrated by Xal'atath? You
I mean,
know,
it might have been the opening of the whole bit to take them over with the Cipher of Damnation, but we don't know. We have no idea who, if they were under control of the old gods when they were attacking Nyalotha. Why would the other old gods be attacking Nyalotha? Lots of reasons. For one thing, they didn't respect N'Zoth.
mm-hmm.
But also, quite possibly, as part of whatever Xal'atath's plan for attacking Nyalotha was, which we've never found out. It certainly could be part of that plan was get them all distracted fighting stuff in Nyalotha so nobody can see me do whatever it is I'm trying to do.
Yeah. I think we're going to move on to the second question here because I think this is also potentially relevant and something that I know that I've been thinking about a lot, which was, do you believe Queen Azshara will be around for midnight with a great powerful influx of power coming from the Sunwell, and they already have the Darkspine Naga on the island? They could be spies or scouts. Eric, what do you think? What do you think we'll see Queen Azshara soon?
I think so. I think she's been biding her time and has, made her escape long enough ago that it seems silly for her to sit this one out, to try for her to try something of whatever her grand plan is. I mean, we know that when the last time she left, she said she was going to claim the true throne of power for herself. Maybe that true throne of power was the Sunwell or something similar to what Xal'atath is after. We got kind of like a little preview on the Siren Isle with the Naga forces there attacking and trying to claim the island and the things going on there. So I think enough groundwork is laid that if we saw her appear later in the expansion, it would make total sense.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp. I think that it's going to be impossible for Queen Azshara not to make an appearance soon. One, the last time we saw her, she was being tortured by old gods, by Xal'atath, essentially. She doesn't have any love for Xal'atath. And if Queen Azshara is nothing, she is absolutely retribution material. So I think that if Xal'atath is messing with things and messing up her plans, you're almost assuredly going to see her pop up and be like, nah, lady, this is my world. This is my power. Get off this rock. She hasn't yet because she's either A, been licking her wounds and recovering from the last time we saw her, or B, as is her prerogative, doing something absolutely unknowable or unfathomable to us. Because, again, she is arguably the most powerful sorcerer or wizard, magic wielder on Azeroth still. And that is not insignificant. With the elves reuniting, and we've talked about this in the past, Queen Azshara is not a fool. She's egotistical, narcissistic, and self-focused, but she is not a fool. She understands what power and strength is, and I think she also understands what happens if Xal'atath wins. So even if she didn't have a personal grudge of, you put me in a box in a void prison and tortured me while everybody around me played soccer, yeah, I think she would still show up. If for nothing else, to take what Xal'atath has as her own power. Maybe not necessarily the void, but could you imagine what Queen Azshara would do if she got her hands on the Dark Heart? What she might be able to do with it? She could do a lot of very dangerous things with it. But I don't think we've seen the last of her. I think we will see her. I would be surprised if not in this expansion. The other thing, from a game and story perspective, I think there is a reason that we were in Legion Remix. And I think it will be relevant to what's coming next. I think that was a deliberate choice to go to Legion next. A lot of us were commenting, and we commented us in the main show, that Legion felt like too soon of an expansion to do a time running or event for, or to do that remix time running event for. But I think there is a reason. And I think threads from Legion are probably going to be pulled on here in Midnight, I think it's relevant. And one of the major voices, one of the major aspects of it was Queen Ashara, especially with her getting the Tidestone still. She has it. She still has it, right? We don't know what other things she made off with, because when we go and put the Pillars of Creation in various different parts of the Temple of Elune, we go and fight our battle, and then we kind of, saunter off into the night. And she got the Tidestone. There's no saying that she didn't grab some of the other ones as well. You never know. Matt?
Well, I think there's a few things we're not really paying attention to right now that relate to Ashara in one way or another. First up is, of course, the most obvious, blatant, and so far upfront villain we've got is Xal'atath. Xal'atath used to live inside a knife, and of all the people in Azeroth, Ashara has both had time to study that knife
Yeah, she did.
and had time to study N'Zoth's binding rituals.
Yep, she worked for N'Zoth for a very long time.
If anybody wanted to put her back in the knife and could do it, it would be Ashara, because she knows how the knife worked, she knows how the binding rituals worked, and she knows it was N'Zoth who put her in the knife in the first place. So that's part the first. Part the second, in an expansion called The Last Titan, and we keep talking about Titans, there is one Titan who does still have his physical body, and it's not any of the Pantheon. It's an ex-member of the Pantheon, namely Sargeras. Sargeras still
his original
has his
body,
physical
at least.
body.
His original body.
Well, the reason I say his physical body is because we don't know for sure what world he turned into Mardum. But it keeps striking me that he deliberately created out of a world a prison for demons. And it was such a good prison that they could only get out on his say-so. And this makes me wonder, what if Mardum was Sargeras' physical body?
Yeah, I've been wondering that for a few, dozen years.
So since we know that one of the things he did on that world was create a prison that could hold demons and keep them from getting back to the Twisting Nether, and we know he specifically bound demons into magical items, like, for instance, several of the artifacts that we see, both warlock and otherwise, and we know that the binding magic that Sargeras possessed was capable of, even to this day, calling demons to come check out what you want, because, if you don't, then you might get suckered into getting sucked into something. I feel like Sargeras, possibly with some domination magic, because it's very similar in terms of binding both to the Cipher of Damnation and to what we see the Titans have taught other people that becomes demon summoning magics. All of this makes me think that the reason the Legion was picked for Remix, I think you were right in terms of it's got some resonance. I think one of the resonances it has is the Lich King.
Yeah, I would agree.
And I think the Lich King and the Helm of Domination and now the Crown of Wills, this is all stuff we're going to see come back up. Not that I think the Crown of Wills is currently on the replacement Arbiter, if I'm not insane. I think he's currently wearing it.
Yeah, the Arbiter is currently wearing it.
That doesn't mean they can't get it off them. They've got to. They got rid of one. So yeah, there's a lot of possibility in terms of what I think we might see. But imagine if Sargeras did come back.
Yeah, I think
the first thing Ashara might do is attempt to convince him to do what she wants. And she's had 10,000 years of dealing with nigh all-powerful cosmic entities and winning. Like, she got what she wanted out of N'Zoth. He didn't end up getting anything from her, really.
Mm-hmm.
All she had to do was put up with, like, what, a couple of weeks of torture for at her age. That's a weekend. That's a weekend spa. Like, oh yeah, so please don't torture me anymore. Like, okay, now I get to leave. Yeah, remember to use the knife. Remember to use the knife on N'Zoth. Ha 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 ha. It just feels an awful lot like she's got a lot of time going to try and Xanatos Gambit her way into Sargeras' good graces, and then end up leaving him holding the check. That just feels like the kind of thing she would do. So I'm just going to point that out, that is another possibility to keep in mind.
Yeah, the other possibility too, and like this is not Ajara, but like just you mentioned Sargeras, so now I've been awoken. There is an entire possibility that we find ourselves on the same side as Sargeras again, where we find out what the truth of the uh Titans were, and part of that happens to be the information that Queen Ajara gives us, or we find out because of her and her knowledge and working with N'Zoth, because again, we haven't talked with her since, and we don't know what she knows, and it might serve her to have us fight the Pantheon, right? And like you said, it may be an instance where she turns to you know turn Sargeras into essentially her errand boy. But also it could be that Sargeras was right all along, and what he was trying to do was actually the right call, and Queen Ajara may find that out. And she is nothing if not a self-preservationist. You can, everything else aside, you can assure that. And if it suits her and it suits her continued push for power, then I don't see how or why she wouldn't do it. So I don't think we've seen the last of her. I think we will see her. It might be as early as this as midnight. It might be this current expansion that we see her. I don't know when, but I do know we will. Eric, any other thoughts on that?
One thing is that she is of Azeroth, and we spend so much time dealing with entities that are from elsewhere, with Xal'atath and the Titans and the Void Lords, that Ashara is from a race that originated on Azeroth, possibly before any of their meddling. So if we were going to have someone, represent us on Azeroth as kind of a theme through all of World of Warcraft, that like we, the inhabitants of Azeroth, are special. We are able to do things that no other world's inhabitants have been able to do, defy the Titans' mandates and things like that. Could she be a champion or a leader of the denizens of Azeroth? So it would be interesting to see her come back, not bursting out of the ocean with 10,000 Naga with tridents saying, I'll take the Dark Heart now, or, like Matt said, she's used to biding her time. So it'd be more likely that she would just appear at exactly the right moment to, assert her power or try to steal, foil Xal'atath's plans. But what if she realized that,
Eric, you're making me think of just imagining like Xal'atath's on the dais holding the thing above her head going, and now finally, then you hear yoink. And Ashara's just tiddling over.
Just like,
what just happened?
Just a really long trident just picks it up.
Wink. Yeah. I'm going to get it. Yeah. Just, I don't know why you just made me think of it. Sorry, man.
But like, we keep thinking of, will she come back? Will she be a raid boss? Will we have to deal with her? Like, what if she's looking at everything that's happening and realizing that all the power she's been gathering and all the things that she's done have been, not for the best, and she realizes, I need the power of Sargeras, and then we can save Azeroth, and then we can claim it. I don't know. I'm just saying that maybe we won't see her in the vein of having to defeat her again. Maybe she'll show up as a neutral party. Maybe she'll show up as an ally.
I would love it if she went and dug up Xavius and resurrected him, and then went and got Sargeras. Was like, look, Xavius, my real boyfriend's here.
Yeah,
just to make Xavius feel worse.
Yeah, I mean, anything that makes Xavier feel worse, I'm on board for. But I think that's going to do it for us today, friends. Again, I do want to remind you that if you have questions for us, make sure that you send those in. You can send them into podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. You can also hit us on our Discord servers. We have 2 channels set aside. We have the Q and Podcast Questions channel, open for everybody. Same rules apply. And then we also have the Q and Podcast Questions, or the Patron Q and Podcast Questions channel. Sorry, folks, it's been a long day. Which is for our Patreon subscribers. We tend to look there first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. And speaking of our Patreon subscribers, we are only made possible by their generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Their continued support means that this site and community is able to thrive and grow. They do get exclusive benefits, not just having that direct line of contact with us, but also they get early access to our podcast through our Patreon subscription, as well as getting an ads-free site experience, which You can't break that these days. For only a couple bucks, you don't have to deal with ads. That's a really good deal. I'm just saying. But yeah, if you're not a Patreon subscriber, please consider doing so. If you can't, we understand times are tough. But consider supporting us in other ways. Share our content with other folks. Leave comments, like our content on the various platforms that you consume it on. Believe it or not, all those things really do make a divine difference in our outreach. And it helps make sure that we stay relevant when the algorithm tries to bury us. Because, we exist. We like existing. But with that, friends, we'll see you next week.